everybody. It's Miss Amanda here, welcoming you to our February DMSO at-home family concert featuring a few of our Des Moines Symphony bassists. Do you know what a bass is? Don't worry, stick around and our musicians will tell you all about the bass. First up, I'd love to introduce Miss Donita. Miss Donita, welcome to our bass concert. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Amanda. I'm very happy to be here. I am Donita McCoy, and I started playing the bass when I was 12 years old. I've played in the Des Moines Symphony for 51 years. And I also was going to say that I live in Ames.
That's awesome. So this is one of my favorite things about being able to stream concerts for all of our audiences is that Donita can be in Ames, I can be in my house in Des Moines, and you can be at your home on your couch or watching wherever you're choosing to watch from, and we can all hang out together. Donita, that's amazing that you've been with the Des Moines Symphony for 51 years. You must have some pretty great memories and some fantastic stories to share at some point.
Oh, I do. I have lots of memories.
Love it. All right, we're going to bring in our next bassist for this concert, and the next one will be Miss Ashley. Hi, Ashley.
Hello, I'm Ashley Eidbo. I have been in the Des Moines Symphony for 11 years, and I started playing the bass when I was 10 years old in my elementary school.
Very cool. Did you play any instruments prior to playing the bass?
I played the piano since I was pretty young, but I didn't really like it. And then as soon as I turned 10 and we had a choice to play an orchestra, I knew I wanted to play the bass right away.
Why? What was so intriguing?
I think it was so cool how low it sounded and how it sounded so different than all the other instruments.
I love that. Fantastic. Well, Ashley, we'll see you again in a little bit to hear some more about your bass. Next up, we have Mr. Jason. Hi, Jason.
Hi. Hey, Amanda. So my name is Jason Wells, and I've been playing the bass since I was 10 years old. And now I've been a part of the Des Moines Sympphony for 3 years.
3 years. That's excellent. And Jason, where are you at right now?
So I am in my home in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. So we have, I believe Ashley is here in Des Moines, Jason in Minneapolis, Donita is in Ames, and I'm in Des Moines. We're all over. It's so great. So Jason, with the Des Moines Symphony, where can you expect to find the basses in the symphony?
Oh, we're always in the back, back of the section. So if you look at the orchestra, you look to the back right behind all the cellists. Is where you'll oftentimes find the basses.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so much looking forward to hearing all about the bass, hearing the differences between your bass, Ashley's bass, Miss Donita's bass, and learning about the history and just hearing some cool facts about it. So I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jason, and he's going to take the concert away for a little bit, and you'll see me back. Don't forget, if you have any questions for our three bassists, put them in the comments below because we'd love to ask them at the very end all of your very interesting questions. Jason, all yours.
Now, I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about my bass. So this bass is over 100 years old. I know, right? Really, really old, right? So, and as you can see, it's pretty big too. So, one of the things I was thinking about was asking you all, which is that what animal does this instrument remind you of? So, a composer named Camille Saint-Saëns thought about that very question, and the answer he came up with was an elephant. Now, and he wrote a piece about it. So, Donita, I believe that you have some real life experience with elephants. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I was able to go to Kenya and go on a safari. And I just fell in love with the little elephants alongside their mothers. And I took lots of pictures. And so we're going to share a few of those pictures.
Oh, cool. And you're going to play a little bit for us too, right?
I'm going to play the elephant. And I thought it would be good if everybody listened to see if Sansa did a good job of sounding like an elephant. And maybe they'd even want to move around like an elephant.
Cool.
Are we ready? What do you think? Do you think they moved like an elephant? You could sounded like an elephant?
It sure sounded that way to me. So now let's think about another animal, a swan. So which instrument reminds you of a swan? Now, Camille Saint-Saëns thought about a cello when he thought about the swan, but us bass players think that the beautiful elegantness of a swan can represent the beautiful sound that can come out of a bass. So how about Ashley? Can you now play a little bit for us, the swan?
I would love to. And now maybe everybody can fly around like a bird.
Very nice. So did you all get a picture of a swan as she played? Now, music can remind us of more than just animals. Music can also remind us of a conversation. This next piece reminds me of a conversation between two people. One person that's asking a question and another person who's answering that question. So see if you could pick up on the conversation. Now, did you pick up on the question and the answer? So let's break it down a bit. So the first question. See how it kind of leaves you hanging at the end? So then we're going to answer that with. There's a little bit of a sigh after that. That answers the question. But here comes another, that answers the question, but here comes another question. Oh, okay. So now that needs an answer too. So now do you get the conversation? Hopefully. So now the next thing I want to talk about is a journey that music can take us on. So in Japan, cherry blossom trees bloom once every year, right around the springtime. And there are these beautiful little pink flowers that show up for about 2 weeks and then fall gently to the ground. Right. So there's a lot of festivals and people get together, and the families, the parents and children get together and throw parties during this time of year. So during this next song, I want to see if you get the image of the cherry blossom. So could you imagine it? Now, I mentioned earlier that the bass is a really big instrument, but just how big is it? Well, why don't we compare it to some of the other instruments in the string family? So Amanda, could you help us out with that?
I would love to. Before we jump into a really great comparison between all of our instruments, we do have a question that has come in from the chat. We have Steve, who's actually the education chair of the Central Iowa Blues Society. If you don't know who the Central Iowa Blues Society is, or I should say what it is, definitely check them out. They do some really cool stuff over there. And Steve, to answer your question, well, I will ask the question and then Jason can answer it. Steve would like to know, are all stand-up basses 4 strings, or are there 5 and 6?
Oh, that's a really good question. So a lot of the basses are 4 strings, but you will sometimes see 5-string basses. And in that 5th string, typically it's going to be really, really low on a low C sound on that. So and this kind of one thing that we were going to talk about, this bass even has an extended string here that gets down to that low C, as if kind of mimicking a 5th string. So, and a lot of basses will do that, and we'll kind of demonstrate that a little bit later on.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you for that answer, Jason. Steve, just to let you know, we're going to be talking about the blues and jazz and bluegrass music. We're going to talk about how the bass is featured in all different types of genres of music. So make sure you're sticking around to that portion also. Okay, so we were going to talk about the comparison of the instruments. Now, Jason, are you sitting down or standing up?
I am sitting down on the stool here.
Could you stand up and let's see how tall your bass is compared to standing?
Oh, yeah. So, and kind of give you an idea, I am about 6 feet tall. So wow. This bass is quite a bit taller than me.
Awesome. Okay, here we go. So I'm also, I kicked my water bottle. I'm also going to recenter myself here because we're sharing the camera space. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but does anybody know what this instrument is? If you said cello, you're correct. Now, my cello is sitting on a chair. That's why it looks pretty tall. But if it's standing next to me, look at that. It is below my shoulder, unlike Jason's bass, which is way above even his head. So we have our cello here. Does anybody know or have any guesses as to how tall or how long the cello is? Let's think about this. Let's see. A piece of paper is about 1 foot long. This paper. So how many feet do you think the cello is? Let's see. I have a tape measure of all things. Let's see if I can make this happen without like actually hitting the cello. So I'm at the top here. I'm gonna go all the way down. And we are, I slipped, at about 4 feet tall. Are you 4 feet tall?
Wow.
Are you taller than 4 feet? Maybe after the concert, you could ask somebody to find a tape measure and see how tall you are compared to a cello.
Now, Ashley, do you have a measurement for the bass?
I do. Is everybody ready for this? I also brought my tape measure today. Let's see, Jason, do you think we'll beat Amanda?
I think so.
All right, well, here I go. I'll be right back. 6.5 feet tall.
Wow. And how tall are you? So that's taller than you too.
Yes, I am 5 feet and 10 inches tall. So this bass is at least 8 inches taller than me.
Wow. That's really, really big.
It is. It's hard to carry sometimes, but we always make it. So we wanted to talk about how high the bass can play and how low the bass can play. I think that everybody heard during when Donita played the elephant, it can play pretty low like an elephant. Can everybody sing as low as you can? Oh, kind of have to tip your face down, I think. Oh. Now, can everybody sing as high as you can? All right, we're going to play now. Donita and Jason. Donita, do you think you could play as low as the bass can play?
I'm pretty sure that I can. I was going to first of all show how the usual bass, the usual E string sounds. That's pretty low.
That is. But can you play lower?
Oh, I can because I have one of those extensions that Jason was talking about. So I can play E. I can play E flat. I can play D. I can play D flat. And I can play C. And I think you can even see can you see that string vibrating?
You see how it looks kind of blurry when Donita's blowing her bow across it? That is so cool. Jason, how high can you play?
Oh, well, I can play pretty darn high. Check this out.
That's pretty high. Could anybody sing higher or lower than that? That would be pretty hard to do.
That'd be really hard to do. Now going back to that low C that Donita played, I was wondering as you were playing that, Donita, like how low would that note be on the piano? And you imagine that the piano has 88 keys, and that note was pretty low. It's like, well, how low on the piano is it? Well, I got one right behind me, and right at the end of the piano, I have this low note. That's an A. Then the key right next to it is B, and then this note right here is what Donita was playing. So it's all the way at the end of the piano. Yeah, Donita, can you play that again? Yeah. Wow, that's low, right? Wow. So Donita, you want to kick off that next section?
Okay. I was just going to look at my notes a minute here. I wrote some notes because I didn't think I did a very good job the last time. Okay, in the elephant piece that I played, that's a piece, an orchestra piece that the basses get to play the melody in, which doesn't happen very often. We usually are just the bottom harmony part, but the whole section gets to play that piece. And so the whole bass section will be playing together. All of us plus the 5 other people in our section in the Des Moines Symphony get to play together. This next piece that we're going to talk about is another chance that the bass players get to have the melody, but it's just for the solo bass. And so the principal bass or the first chair bass gets to play this piece. And it's a piece that has only a timpani accompanying it. But we don't have a timpani here. So you and I are going to have to be the timpani. If you have an instrument, you can play along with me. If you don't have an instrument, you can just march in time. But the timpani plays just 2 notes. I'm going to stand up so I'm a little bit closer so you can see and hear a little better. So the timpani just plays D, A, D, A. So I'm going to give a count off, and Jason is going to play, and Ashley are going to play the solo. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Did anyone notice the difference between Jason and me playing that? I played it a lot lower than Jason did.
Say, how much lower was it?
1 octave. Does anyone know what that means? On the piano, you might find the same note in a bunch of different places, and every time you find it lower, that's called 1 octave lower. And so I played this 1 octave lower than Jason.
Oh, that's cool.
I wanted to tell everybody something else that's kind of cool about the bass. The bass has so many different things than the violin or the viola or the cello. The bass gets to do all sorts of things that they don't get to do. That's why we think we're the most fun section. We have basses that are so big, and some people's basses are a little bit smaller. We also have 2 different kinds of bows to choose from. And this is kind of fun. So we have the bow that I'm playing with here. This is called a French bow. And you hold it like this, which kind of looks like a violin holds their bow. But because the bass has a different history than the violin, a lot of bass players like to use something called a German bow, which you actually hold underneath the bow. Isn't that interesting? No other string instrument gets to use a bow like this. So here's the difference between the 2, a French bow and then a German bow. That's pretty cool because it's definitely something no one else gets to say. Also, some bows have white hair. This is horsehair. If you don't know, this is horsehair. Isn't that funny? And so some basses have white hair on their bows, and some basses, like Donita, actually have black hair on their bows. Isn't that neat? It just depends on what kind of horse you got your hair from. Some people think you can play a little bit louder with the black hair, but I like to prove them wrong. Well, now we want to talk about all the different ways that the bass can be used. So we've shown you some ways that the bass can be in classical music. We all play in the Des Moines Symphony, so we play a lot of classical music. But sometimes we get to play other types of music, and maybe you've even been able to come to a concert like that before. Sometimes at the 4th of July, when we have a concert outdoors, we play lots of kinds of music. We play music that might have a really strong beat. We might play jazz music. And so we just wanted to share with you some pictures and tell you some stories about different ways the bass can be used. So this is a picture of me. This is when we played recently in the temple, where some of you might go to the Symphony Academy. We had a concert here. And so this is a bass section in a classical symphony. We also can play in a bluegrass or a country band. I don't know if you've ever heard anything like that, maybe on the radio. The bass doesn't usually get a very exciting part, but it's a very important part. And here's a picture of somebody playing bluegrass. So she's singing and playing at the same time. Do you think you can do that? That's hard. Jason, do you have any other ideas of what the bass might play?
Yeah, I got a few ideas. The bass can also is a important part in jazz. Now, this next picture is of a jazz quintet. So you have a piano player, a sax player, a trumpet player, the drums, and then also a bass player. And this is a really iconic bass player named Ron Carter, who's played with some of the best musicians that they are out there. And now, so in this other photo is going to be of another bass player named Charles Mingus, who plays jazz. But he also composes music. Did you know that bass players a lot of times also compose music? So that's him at the piano as well, playing piano as well as bass. So, and now, in addition to this bass here, part of the bass family, if I can get this out, is the electric bass. All right, so let's talk about a few people who have played the electric bass. So the first person is going to be on the left, a guy named James Jamerson. And all of the old Motown records, I know some of the younger ones might not know about that, but ask your parents. They'll know a lot of these records that have been around and people have really, really liked for a lot of years. And those records influence bass players, electric bass players that are playing today, like the guy on the right, whose name is Thundercat, who also composes music. All right, and then the next electric bass player is a personal favorite of mine named Victor Wooten, and he's a true virtuoso on the electric bass. That means that he can play anything he wants to play, and he plays in a whole bunch of different genres on electric bass. He can play jazz, he can play bluegrass, a little bit of classical, a little bit of everything. So that is a whole bunch of topics about the bass. So I want to throw it back to Amanda and see if we have any questions.
Absolutely. We do have a few questions. Everyone, this has been so much fun, and I'm really excited to do a little bit more, but I'm going to throw some curveballs at our bass players today. So I hope that everybody's ready for this because nobody knows what's about to happen. First, I'm so glad that you've all joined me in the camera. Let's answer some of these questions. So the first one comes from, I have to scroll to find it. Where did it go? Lisa. Lisa would like to know if each of your basses have their own names. So let's start with Miss Donita. Donita, does your bass have a name?
My bass does have a name. My bass's name is Guinevere because my bass came from England. Jason said his bass was over 100 years old. Mine isn't that old. It's getting close to 50 years old though, that seems like a new bass. It doesn't seem like I've had it that long, but I got it brand new from England, and so I named it Guinevere.
I love that. Thank you so much. Ashley, does your bass have a name?
You know what? My bass doesn't have a name. My bass is Italian though, and it's 149 years old. So if anybody has any good ideas for an Italian bass that's very, very old, you can maybe put them in the chat. So that could help me name it.
I love that. Ashley, could you do me a favor really quick? And would you play all 4 of your strings?
Yeah.
Use one of your bows.
So here's G, D, A. Now I'm going to show you my 4th string, but then I'm going to show what everybody else has been showing, how low we can play. So here's an E. And if I just flip this switch, suddenly I have a C.
Wow, that is incredible. So I'm going to grab my instrument. And one second, one more thing. I had to go off screen. Most of you who are watching probably know that I'm a violinist, not a bassist. And I sort of can play like Twinkle Twinkle on the cello, and I can sort of play Twinkle Twinkle kind of stuff on the viola. So part of the reason why we brought in our bass friends is because they're the experts on the bass. Now, Ashley just played an E on her bass. Here is an E on the violin. That's crazy. That's so different, and I love the difference of it. Now, going back to the question of does your bass have a name? Jason, does your bass have a name?
You know what? My bass doesn't have a name. There, I had another bass a few years ago that did have a name, but I haven't landed on one for this bass yet. Now, this bass, as I was saying before, was over 100 years old, and it's from Germany. So if anybody has an idea for names, I am open to suggestions.
I love that. My violin is actually also from Germany. So that's kind of fun. Ashley, would you do me a favor and can actually all of us hold up our bows and just show the difference of our bows? So
Yeah.
Violinists only I've never seen a violinist use anything but white horsehair. But here's my bow. There's the difference. And so compared to our hand, look at this. That's how big my frog is.
I can't hold it up.
We're all dealing with really, really large instruments. Awesome. Great. So a couple more questions, and then we might do some more fun activities. And again, none of our bassists know what we're doing right now. So I appreciate their joy to improv with me throughout this concert. So next question. Actually, it's not a question. I forgot. Miss Aunt Norma says, hello, Jason.
Oh, hi.
So I thought we would just say, hi, Norma.
Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Thank you for watching.
Awesome. And then last question that we have so far that I can see at the moment at least, is from Steve again. Steve, gosh, you're asking some really fantastic questions. He says, aside from the 4 strings in the symphony setting, do any symphony charts, that's an interesting word that you chose to use there, we'll come back to that, call for using an instrument as auxiliary percussion, like slapping the bass, for example. So can you demonstrate, Jason, I'm going to throw this to you. Can you demonstrate a couple of other techniques besides using your bow that a bass or that might be called for in a bass part for a symphony?
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. Obviously, one of the main things that we all do is a little bit of plucking, right? But there are times where we do a little bit of slapping on the bass. And then also, some of weirder sounds as, if I lift the bass up here, sometimes it might be called for us to play on the tailpiece there. And it actually makes a big like subwoofer sounds, a really weird sound. Now, it doesn't come across through this platform, so I won't do it for you. But you imagine it's like whoa, 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 kind of the sound. And other things, there's like a creaking sound. If you just put your bow on the string, push down, and go side to side like this, it makes almost like a door opening and closing sound. Once again, it doesn't come through really well in this platform. But yeah, we and then also tapping our bow on the wood side of the stick. Something called Coligno gets we do that quite a bit in orchestra as well. So those are the ones just off the top of my head.
Awesome. I love it. So another thing that he said, he called it a chart. And I love that because that's definitely a blues and jazz term. So music in the symphony, we don't actually call it a chart. What would you say that we call it, Donita?
I probably would just call it music.
Or what about the thing that the conductor looks at, Ashley? What would we call that?
That's a score that has everybody's part written in it.
Every
so
single part.
Very confusing to look at.
Yeah. So imagine you are the conductor and you are seeing 4 of us musicians on the screen right now. And then on your page in front of you, you have 4 different parts that you have to follow along at the exact same time. Being a conductor is a very tricky job, especially when there's more than 4 musicians in your symphony. Does anybody have an idea about how many musicians a large symphony orchestra might have? Let's see if you can answer those in the chat. In the meantime, I think a fellow bassist has asked Ashley, Dominic has asked you, Ashley, what are you holding?
Well, I think what he was wondering about is I was holding this, which is called a German bow, which we just talked about. And in our bass section, Dominic plays this kind of bow, but the rest of us play this kind of bow, just like the violin. So I think Dominic was a little bit surprised to see me holding this, but I borrowed this from our friend Corey. It's not really mine.
I love that. That's awesome. So question, I've got another one. How many bows do you own for your classical bass? And when you bring, do you bring them all along as when you're performing?
Ooh, that's a great question, and I could take that one. If you give me a moment here, I actually have mine on display. I could show you my collection here. So I'm just gonna move the camera to this wall, and you see I have my 3 other bows in this one, and then I have a couple other ones as well, part of the collection. Now, I will only travel with one or play, when I go play somewhere, I only take one with me. But in case something happens to this one, I have another one that will be good to go because the show must go on. So
that's one thing that's really funny. When I was teaching full-time in person, at one point in time, I had 3 bows in my case. And some of my students were like, Miss Amanda, why do you have 3 bows? I want 3 bows. And I'm like, you're 7. It's okay. You can wait. I have 3 bows. And I was playing a gig. So like the bluegrass player that we saw earlier, whose name is Miss Steph Graham, by the way. She plays in bluegrass, and I play with other bands around town, kind of like how Steph plays in bluegrass. I was playing in a band, and the hair at the tip of my bow fell out, just popped out. It's not supposed to do that. So that bow broke, and then about 5 minutes later, this actual bow, right here, this is actually how we tighten the bow hair. It wouldn't tighten anymore. So my hair on my bow wouldn't tighten. And so I went through 2 bows in one gig.
Wow.
Well, for the bass, our instrument is really big, and we have to buy a car that's really big so we can fit our bass into the car. So we have to decide how much stuff we want to carry with us. So sometimes we just have to think, I sure hope my bow doesn't break today, because it's hard to carry too much stuff. We actually use a wheel a lot of times. So a lot of people use a wheel to get our bass around. The bass is about maybe 20 or 30 pounds, but then you put a case on it, and you put your bow in the case, and then you put all of your orchestra music in the case, and then you put some snacks, because we always get hungry. And pretty soon our whole bass weighs 60 pounds, and that's hard to carry. It's hard to get through doors. It's hard to do a lot of things, and so we always have to just choose how many things we want to carry that day.
Now, Ashley, you're forgetting about one thing that we also oftentimes carry. This right here. A lot of us would bring our own stools to different gigs that we may do, which makes getting through doors even more tricky than it would be without carrying something like that. So,
yeah. If you ever see a bass player, just hold the door for them.
Please hold the door.
I love that. That's so awesome. We have some more questions that are coming in. And really quick, I want to go back to the amount of musicians that are in a full symphony orchestra. On average, and it's depending on the orchestration, which means what is asked for in the score. It's about 90, actually. So our Des Moines Symphony musicians, when they're performing at the Civic Center, a full symphony, will have around 90 musicians on stage. For our live from the Temple performances, we'll have a maximum of 35 musicians on stage, which is part of the reason why we have different repertoire that you're hearing from our live from the Temple versus what you might hear at the Civic Center, just because we have more musicians or less musicians. So now going to James. James, gosh, your questions are just really exciting. So I'm going to throw this one to Ashley. James is asking, does anyone know why a bass is tuned to fourths, but the other stringed instruments are tuned to fifths?
Well, do you remember how I told you that we have 2 different kinds of bows? We have this kind that's called a German bow, and this kind that's called a French bow. And the French bow you hold just like a violin bow. Well, it turns out that the bass and the violin are not really siblings. They're kind of like distant cousins. And so in a long, long, long time ago, when you had a bass, it was actually played with different instruments called gambas. And all those gambas were tuned like a bass is tuned in fourths. It's different than the violin, the viola, and the cello. So basses actually have an entirely different history, and it makes all these different things like a German bow possible for us to use today, because we are able to use violin type techniques and gamba techniques.
Wow, that's a really cool story. And that's something that I didn't know either. So Ashley, thank you for sharing that little bit of information. I love it. So James is also wondering, and Donita, I'm going to ask you this one. What is the smallest car you've ever put your bass in? And Donita's special because not only is she a wonderful human, but I believe that her husband also plays the bass, and they have to have a very different car to fit 2 basses.
We had, yeah, when we went car shopping, the car dealers remembered us because we always had to shop for a 2-bass car. So we had a 2-bass car and a 1-bass car because sometimes we were going in different directions and each playing in different places. The car I have right now that I carry my bass in is a Prius, and that's probably about as small as I would be able to go and still get it in easily and comfortably. But we usually had a van, some type of minivan, in order to get both basses in.
I love that. So for the kids who are watching, don't forget that most everybody on the screen here for the bassists started their instrument, started the bass at either 10 or 12 years old. So when you're small, maybe like that, like the size of the cello, which was how big was the cello? Do you remember? 4 feet. So when you're about 4 feet tall, you're probably not going to play a bass. So you might start out on a violin like this, but get smaller. And if you go back to other family concert videos, you can see the small ones. Or you might start out on the cello and then change to the bass when you're 10, 11, 12 years old, when it fits a little bit better. Next question we have, has anybody had a string break while you were playing? And I'm going to add to this, what do you do if it's in the middle of a concert, Jason? What do you do if your string breaks?
Wow. You know, I have never had a string break on me. That has luckily not happened. It is a loud event when a bass string breaks. And I don't know, have either of you had a string break?
I've never. Ashley, have you?
My C string broke.
Whoa.
In college, yeah.
Oh, I've never had one actually break and pop like a violin string does. But I came back after an intermission one time, and my, I think it was my A string. I don't remember which string, but I couldn't get it in tune, and it was slipping, and it wasn't hooked. I think it was not hooked in right. Fortunately, my husband and the principal bass player at the time knew what to do. They tied some kind of a knot in it or did something and got it so it would stay in tune so I could finish the concert. But I've never had one, break like a violin string does.
These are all excellent questions that are coming in. I would like our bassists to prepare to do a twinkle twinkle round here. We're going to start on, let's see, what's your second to highest string?
D.
We'll start on D in just a minute. We're going to check the comments one more time. So we are wondering if, last question before we kind of wrap this up here, just a little bit. Last question is, has anybody played an electric upright bass?
Ooh. I have never performed with an electric upright bass, but I've played on a few, which are really, really cool now, because I also spent a couple of years playing bluegrass music. So, carrying this thing around to music festivals and things like that is a little bit difficult. So, I was considering getting one to make it a little bit easier to travel with, so yeah.
So what's really interesting about an electric bass and electric violins and electric cellos and whatnot, kind of similarly to an electric guitar or an electric bass that you would hold with a strap, you can also have acoustic electric instruments. So, for example, they do make some violins, and you guys would have to answer this, that have a pickup that you plug in just like a guitar. But they also have ones that are really, really cool, where it is just the outline of the instrument and you can see through it, which is crazy. They're actually really hard to hear. And one thing that people kind of maybe not really think about is that us musicians are trained to hear our instrument because we don't have frets, right? So our instruments we could play, let's see, we're going to play Twinkle here in a second. And if I can't hear myself, my fingers might go like this, which is not that pretty when you're trying to play in tune. So electric instruments are very, very cool. They definitely look very cool. Last question. Steve got another one in before we play our Twinkle Twinkle round. And the reason we're doing the Twinkle round is because I want to hear the tone that what each of your instruments sound like on the same thing. So Steve would like to know if bass strings have different gauges between the highest and the lowest.
Ooh, that's a good question there. They do have different gauges and depends on what we're playing. So that's really a hot topic in the bass world about what kind of strings to use. I feel like if you get more than one bass player together, we're going to talk about strings. We'll use thinner strings when we're playing some solo repertoire. As you know, we were playing up pretty high, and it's a lot easier to play on thinner strings if you're going to be moving around all around the bass really quickly. And then for orchestra, when we're playing in the bottom of the section of the orchestra, and we're providing support for all those 90 musicians, we'll a lot of times want to have thicker strings to produce more sound, right? And more power, more oomph, from the bottom end.
That's fantastic. Awesome. Jason, thank you for that description. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our Twinkle Twinkle round so that you can hear the different characters of each of our Des Moines Symphony bassists' bass. Now, that's a very tricky thing to hear or to say, so I'm glad you stuck with me through that. Donita, you are first. Will you play Twinkle Twinkle starting on B? Awesome. Ashley. And Jason. I love that. And I know it was just the beginning of it, but I bet those of you listening at home can finish that song all by yourself or even with the rest of your family. Bassists, Jason, Ashley, Donita, thank you so much for joining me today and talking all about that bass with our audience of the Des Moines Symphony and the Des Moines Symphony Academy. It is a joy spending time with you, and I look forward to hearing you at our next performance live from the Temple on March 18th. We'll talk to you all later, and I have a couple more updates for the rest of our audience. Stay tuned. 1 second. Bye, everybody. Okay, so live from the Temple, as I mentioned just 2 seconds ago, we will be performing on March 18th, starting at 6:30. There's a really, really great introduction, and the concert goes on at 7. Those live from the Temple performances are available for 30 days after the initial performance. So if you're busy on the 18th, you can tune in any day after that for up to 30 days. If you enjoyed our Des Moines Symphony DMSO at home family concert, the next one will be on March 28th. It'll be the last Sunday at 4 p.m. as usual, and we will be seeing more of our Des Moines Symphony musicians. This time, an entire string quintet will be performing. So make sure you're bringing your listening ears. Any questions for our musicians? And we look forward to seeing you at the end of March. Have a fantastic, beautiful, weather-filled week, everybody. We're almost to spring. It's been a joy spending time with you. Have a fantastic rest of your Sunday. Bye, everybody.